When it comes to those teams that rank at the top of my list of favorite punching bags, the Jets most certainly are there. And let's face it, they are an easy target, and they make themselves an easy target. And sometimes the way Jets fans act doesn't help matters. It makes them an even easier target and a more fun target to go after. Now, look, I know that the Jets are playing in a tough division this year, and I know there's perhaps some optimism there with a new general manager in the fold, a new head coach in Todd Bowles, the trading for Brandon Marshall, and the signing of Darrell Revis. But I really don't see why Jets fans have a lot of reason for optimism, and I really don't see why this team is getting some of the love. They're not getting as much, obviously, as the Bills or the Dolphins in the AFC East for sure. But I'm not understanding why the Jets are getting some of the love that they are, frankly, heading into 2015. Now, there are things to like about this team. I do like the receiving core. Now that you add in somebody like a Brandon Marshall, a legit number one NFL wide receiver, you throw him in along with an Eric Decker. Hopefully, they get Jason Morrow to be healthy and play well this year. They get a guy like Devin Smith, their second round pick out of Ohio State. Maybe he can come in at some point in time and be a kind of difference making option that can line up both outside and in the slot. That would also allow Brandon Marshall to line up in the slot as well. This is a Jets team that does have some horses in the passing game. They do. I mean, it's not the best receiving unit in the league, but you could do far, far worse for sure, as Kansas City, just as one example. I look at that defensive line, and God knows that better be a fucking strength. Former first round picks Muhammad Wilkerson and Sheldon Richardson, and this year's first round pick Leonard Williams. This had better be the best unit in the National Football League. You invest 3 first round picks into one area of the ball, which is even more ridiculous when you're playing the 3-4. And it better be the best defensive line in all of the National Football League. I expect it to be a strength of the team, if not the strength of the team. But ultimately, the Jets are the Jets, and even with all the high picks they've spent on the defensive line, it still won't be the best defensive line unit in the league. I do like what they have at the corner position. You bring in Darrell Revis, you bring back Antonio Cromartie, you bring in Buster Screen, a huge significant upgrade over anything they've trotted out there at the corner position over the last 2 years or so. Especially last year, they were abysmal in the secondary, especially outside. Now you would hope that would have been addressed, that would have been fixed, because that was a major problem for that Jets team. They couldn't naturally get a pass rush in a lot of cases with 4 or 5, so they had to blitz far too often, similar to what Arizona had to do under their defensive coordinator, Todd Bowles. But the problem was not only could the Jets not consistently get pressure with 4 or 5, sometimes they couldn't get pressure with 6 or 7. On top of that, their corners outside basically couldn't defend any damn body. So you would hope with upgrading that secondary on the outside that would help. So that way, at least if anything else, if you do have to blitz 6 or sometimes bring 7, you can maybe actually guard somebody. Maybe you can actually defend somebody in the passing game. Now, with that said, though, it just wouldn't be the Jets if there weren't concerns all over the place. You start at the quarterback position, it ain't going to really end there. I mean, I don't know what the hell I ever saw in Geno Smith. He's more concerned with stiffing a 6th-round pick defensive lineman out of $600 for a fucking plane ticket than he is learning how to play the quarterback position at the National Football League level. And he got punched in the jaw, frankly, for being the dumbass that he's been. He almost kind of deserved it. And then if you're the Jets, then what do you turn to? Ryan Fitzpatrick? Oh, good God. And then what? Bryce Petty? Oh, heaven Christ, please. You're not going to contend in a division with Tom Brady and Ryan Tannehill, even with Ryan Fitzpatrick or Geno Smith as your starting quarterback. You're just not. And it's not made any better by the fact that you have an offensive line that I think is starting to crack and is not quite as good as it was maybe a few years ago. You got Ferguson on the wrong side of 30, Mangold on the wrong side of 30. Yes, they brought in James Carpenter via free agency, but not really a good offensive line unit to begin with. To me, it seems like they're destined for a year that everything's going to fall apart very, very soon on that unit, and it could be this year. What I really don't like, though, about this team and its makeup and its construction is somewhat similar to how my Bears were built and constructed for 2014. A lot of free agents, a lot of trades for veteran players, makes you old. There's a lack of continuity there. There's a lack of chemistry there. There's a lack of the Jets way or your individual team, your organization's way. You're trying to break bad habits. You're trying to do this. You're trying to do that. And all the while, you end up with 8 starters on your opening day roster that are 30 or older. And those starters, a lot of them are in key areas. They're some of the best players on this team. That's not a good thing. That's a bad thing. It's a really bad thing. And then you look at the addition of Brandon Marshall via trade. He is a legit number one NFL wide receiver. He had 3 really good years with the Bears. But think about it. The Bears stunk to high hell in 2014, and they couldn't wait to get rid of him. Similar to how the Miami Dolphins couldn't wait to get rid of him. Similar to how the Denver Broncos couldn't wait to get rid of him. Is that really the type of guy that you want in your locker room? A guy who ended up being a very toxic presence at the end in Chicago. Do you really want to bring him into that Jets locker room where you're lacking leadership all over the place? It's because you're especially not getting it from the fucking quarterback position. That's for damn sure. And when you're sitting there and trading for people like Brandon Marshall, I understand the price was really, really good, and it was. But maybe the price was really, really good for a reason, and maybe that price isn't all it was cracked up to be. And even bringing in a Darrelle Revis and an Antonio Cromartie, these are veteran players, wrong side of 30. Just you look at the offensive line again. Ferguson over 30, Mangold 30. I have reasons for concern because I look at this, and when you see a team that is so active and aggressive in the free agency and trade market, that lets you know just how poorly they've drafted for X number of years. That lets you know that they're trying to compensate for something, and that means that there's not a lot of depth there, which this Jets team does not have, and that if they have any injuries at all, which they are bound to have because it's the NFL and that's how it goes, especially when you feature a roster of older players like this, that it's only going to get downhill from here. In terms of players to watch for this Jets team in 2015, got to look at that quarterback position. Is somebody going to step up and show that they could be an NFL starting quarterback? Is somebody going to take the reins of this team? Is somebody going to at least be semi-productive? You look at Devin Smith, their second-round pick out of Ohio State. They don't need him to be the 4th or 5th wide receiver on the depth chart like I believe he is right now. They need him to at least, if anything else, be that number 3 option early on in his rookie season and stay there all year long. They need what he can bring to the table. They need his speed. They need his explosiveness. They need his big playability because if they can get that out of him, it adds another element to this Jets offense, and it could help mask some of the deficiencies you have at the quarterback position on the offensive line. And you actually have a Jets offense that you have to respect a little bit, especially in the passing game. On the defensive side of the ball, though, I look at a couple of former first-round picks because God knows this organization only loves to spend first-round picks on the fucking defense that still isn't elite after all these damn years. You look at their first-round pick from a few years ago, Quentin Coples out of North Carolina. I mean, this is a really talented individual. This is a guy with all types of athletic ability and upside, immense potential. And, of course, because it's the Jets, they can't seem to find a way to get it out of him. And after all this time, he still hasn't fully shown what he can do. He hasn't lived up to his full potential. And sometimes it's either time to shit or get off the pot with this guy. For the Jets, similar to the Cardinals last year, defensive coordinator Todd Bowles, where they had to sit there and bring the house so often because they couldn't consistently get a pass rush with 3, 4, 5 people, the Jets were in that position last year where they have to do the same thing. If they can get Quentin Coples to be a more consistent force on the edge as an edge rusher, it means instead of having to bring 6, maybe they could bring 5. Instead of sometimes having to bring 5, they only have to bring 4. And if you could do that, you could drop more back into coverage, and you're increasing your chances of being successful as a pass defense. Coples has to play better. The Jets need him to play better. He must play better, period. Because it could really impact all areas of the defense if he did. Similar to a Calvin Pryor, their first-round pick from last year. He had some moments where he looked good, but then he had some other moments that he really, really looked not so good. Now, it helps, sure, that he has a much more competent trio of corners out there in 2015 in Revis, Cromartie, and Screen than he did last year, for sure, in whatever configuration or conglomerate of fuck that the Jets would throw out there at the corner position. But they still need Pryor to be an impact player. You took him at the 18th overall pick. You took him as a safety in the first round. He needs to play like an impact-making, game-changing type of safety. And that was just too far and few between for him as a rookie. If you have invested as heavily in the defense as the Jets have over the past 5, 6 years in terms of first-round picks, you had best damn believe you better have the best defensive unit in the National Football League. And, of course, because they're Jets, they don't. They don't even really have a top 10 unit if we're being perfectly honest. Maybe they'll play better under Todd Bowles. Maybe he'll get them to get more out of themselves. But this is a team that needs more out of certain guys, and I'm not sure that they're going to get it. Now, in terms of their schedule, when you look at it, that early part of the season, the first 4 games, is going to be critical because they got the Browns at home, which is a winnable game. But then the next 3 games, they go to Indianapolis, they host Philadelphia, and they go to Miami. Those are what appear to be 3 pretty tough games, 2 of them on the road, one of them a divisional game. If the Jets can handle business and beat the Browns in week 1, they must find a way to at least win one of those next 3 games. So that way, at least after 4 weeks, they're 2-2. They don't feel great, but they don't feel terrible. They're not out of the mix. They at least have a chance. And maybe for the Jets, that's enough. They win 2 out of their first 4. They feel like they're competitive. They feel like they're in it. And maybe they start to believe that they're actually in it and they can play above themselves and play better than they actually are. And sometimes that's all it takes for teams. Sometimes that's what it's all about. And maybe that's what the Jets need to do. But they must find a way to win 2 of those first 4 games. They absolutely must. Otherwise, it's going to be a very, very long year for this Jets team. Then you look at weeks 8 and 9. I think this is another important stretch for them. 2 critical games in terms of either A, if they win both of them, maybe it keeps them in the mix a little bit longer, or B, if they lose both of them or even one of them, it perhaps improves their draft position for 2016 where they can go get a real quarterback. They go to Oakland and then they host Jacksonville. Those are, again, in theory, 2 winnable games. If the Jets want to sit there and try and at least hover around 500, maybe a little better, and entertain that thought for as long as possible, then these are 2 games that this team must win. These are 2 games where they have to be able to handle business. If they lose one of these 2 or they lose both of them, then you might as well just throw in the towel, cave the rest of the year, and get that number 1 pick in 2016, baby. And frankly, when you look at this Jets team, I'm being negative about them because, again, frankly, they deserve it. But I think they got a little bit better in the offseason. I think they'll play a little bit better more consistently. I think the fact that they got rid of Rex Ryan was a huge plus for them. But this is still not a very good football team. They have some serious concerns in my eyes at the quarterback position, on the offensive line, and the fact that a lot of their best players are age 30 and older, and that's usually not a good thing. It really isn't. And when you factor in as well that they're playing in a division where they still have to face Tom Brady twice a year, even though this team in theory still somewhat matches up well against the Patriots, and maybe they could beat them once. They play the Dolphins twice a year with Tannehill, who's better than anything they've got on the Jets roster at quarterback, but maybe that's a team that they can beat once. And the Bills, they look as well to be an improved team. But again, they could be talking about Tyrod Taylor and or E.J. Manuel at quarterback, which isn't necessarily a whole lot better than anything the Jets have to offer. Maybe they could beat them once. If the Jets can sit there and win 6 games and go 2-4 or 3-3 in the division under their first-year head coach and their new general manager, I think that's a good season in one respect and in one sense. I think Jet fans should be happy with that. I think playoff hopes, frankly, for this team, there is no indication at all and any reason to honestly, legitimately believe at this point that the New York Jets can be a playoff team in 2015. There just isn't. If it happens, it happens, but it's not anything you could legitimately foresee. And if you say so, you're full of shit. This is a team that just as easily could win 3 games and end up with a top 3 pick in the 2016 NFL Draft. And maybe long-term, that would be the best thing for this organization because maybe finally, they'd be in a position where they wouldn't take a damn defensive player in the first round and they'd actually get a franchise quarterback because God knows there are certain organizations that badly need them, including my Chicago Bears. But the Jets are right up there at the top of that list too.